Hi everyone. I wanted to do a video entitled Why You Should Bitcoin. And in this I'd like to talk about some of the, not the technical elements of it, but what Bitcoin can offer you and why you're missing out on some of the most amazing opportunities you've ever been presented with regards to this technology. And it's a political technology, so I might rub a lot of people up the wrong way here, and a lot of people are quite diplomatic around this, and they say Bitcoin is different things to different people, and I certainly am guilty of not thinking well of people who don't find themselves where I am politically with my perspective on the world and the hot topics of the political footballs and hot potatoes. I find it's maybe not a great part of me to be so intolerant of people that can't see the world the way I see it. But that said, I think people are really making some terrible mistakes at the moment. First and foremost is COVID, and I'm going to tie all this back to how Bitcoin helps, but I'm going to explain where I am at with some of the things at the moment. The first, as I mentioned, is COVID. This is something that we are having a very hard time getting any reliable data on whatsoever. And we know for a fact that the tests people are being given are insane with the false positives. We've seen people in parliamentary buildings testing stuff like glasses of water and cans of Coca-Cola and coming up with positive results for COVID. And this is giving us, we are doing things that don't make any sense based off of data which we know is wrong. We are seeing before our eyes the obvious benefit of leaving your economy running like normal, and the obvious disadvantages of turning your country into a police state to try and control something which cannot be controlled in order to appease, at best, in order to appease a very frightened population who is begging a government to do all that it can to try and protect the vulnerable. I don't believe that is the motivation behind the control we're up against now. Nonetheless, if I assume as positively as possible, then that is the stated aim, just to protect people from this disease. Even if that was the goal, it's been completely ineffective. Lockdowns are a complete failure. When we compare countries that have done lockdowns to countries that haven't, the countries that aren't doing lockdowns and aren't mandating masks are doing better than the ones that do. And given the destruction of the economy, the rates of suicide, the rates of drug abuse, the rates of domestic abuse, the complete denial of a childhood to any children growing up in this climate and day and age, once you factor all that into account, it's a travesty and an absolute tragedy. And more to the point, these freedoms are not going to come back lightly, because they don't. I am not accepting a mandatory vaccine, which I consider to be incredibly poorly tested, in order to regain the right to travel again that I've been enjoying for my whole life. These are freedoms that are essential and have been chipped away at, and suddenly we've seen an avalanche and a cascade of encroachment into what was once considered a completely normal and dignified way to live your life by corrupt health authorities and governmental politicians who have no clue about health whatsoever, who are completely disingenuous in their motives, who have done absolutely nothing to help anyone, and who have not missed a single paycheck, while everyone else, all of the small businesses they've destroyed, all of the lives they've ruined, they are casting blame and aspersion at people that would live their life like normal, and saying it's their fault and Christmas wouldn't be cancelled if only you'd shown some discipline in November, blah blah blah. This is disgraceful what's going on, and it's so painful to really acknowledge the truth of it all, which is that it's my own species doing this to itself. It's not all of us fighting the system like I would dream it would be, or like some sort of Hollywood movie. Instead, it's basically most of the people I know are terrified of this disease, and are so blinded by that fear that they are not noticing that there is always the number one priority when it comes to making collective decisions and protecting your community. There is always a top priority, and that is not letting the government get out of control and not turning your society into a police state. There are very, very, very few things that justify that level of control. Yeah, if COVID was flying HIV and Ebola and brain cancer all mixed in together, maybe. But even then, if it was that, you wouldn't need to mandate all this stuff because people would do it voluntarily. The only reason the mandates are necessary, and the lies of people don't spread this stuff, people do spread this stuff, even if you don't have symptoms, even if blah, 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 even if you're 5 years old, you still need to wear a mask, this is not true. It hasn't been true for any coronavirus in the past. When the politics is removed from the science, you get masks don't make a blind bit of difference when it comes to flus and colds. And this is something that's been politicized and is now a part of people's identity, wearing a mask and casting aspersions and feeling superior to people that would refuse to do that. And while I'm on the other side of that, I consider not wearing a mask to be some sort of identity, some sort of identification and tribal behavior to go the opposite way. I'm sorry, I feel it's necessary to do it. I'm not going to be forced to wear this thing whenever I go outside. It's not right, it's not dignified, and the science doesn't support it either. So at this point, it becomes like political correctness. It becomes endorsing something that I know to be false in order to be allowed in to civilized society. And I'm not okay with that. That's not a thing anyone should be okay with. And back to the point that I was making, these freedoms never come back once they're given away. This is sort of a tired old trope at this point, but we heard at the beginning of this thing, it's going to be 2 weeks, we're going to stomp the curve, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to... No, we are basically a year into this now. Look at the UK, look at how bad the lockdowns have got there. Look at the perversion of the scientific method. Look at the fact that the World Health Organization is redefining what herd immunity is. They now deny that it can come from everyone having caught the disease and becoming immune. They say the only way to achieve herd immunity is through vaccination. They changed the definition in front of our eyes. And they spent the entire beginning of the pandemic, by the way, praising China's transparency. China is a fucked up, fascist, Nazi shithole that is busy harvesting organs of people barely guilty of anything, ethnic cleansing, massive concentration camps, political re-education. China is Nazi Germany in the 30s. It's the nasty thing the whole world doesn't really want to admit and kind of wants to turn a blind eye because it's just too horrible to believe the stuff you hear about it. China is a disgrace. And the World Health Organization sits there praising them and praising them and praising them. And this is a political organization. They've got nothing to do with health or science. They are a political arm. They are a tool of a totalitarian state, which no one should accept. No one should be buying a product that comes from China. No. Anyway, enough of the COVID rant. If you don't find yourself with this perspective, I would like to be respectful and say, I'm not saying COVID doesn't exist. I'm not saying it's not a horrible disease if you catch it. I was terrified at the beginning too. When I was washing my hands so much that the backs of my hands were bleeding. I was wearing a stupid N95 mask everywhere, and everyone was looking at me like I was crazy. And I had to go to Vancouver in late February of 2019, and I was terrified because no one else was giving a shit about the virus then. And that's when it felt like it was my responsibility for my family and to take things seriously. But that's not what we're doing now. Now we are ignoring all of the evidence we could gather for ourselves and just and telling other people what to do based on some sort of half-assed science that is not is not respectful of the scientific method, and we turn science into this is just a more general perspective of this is more a general feeling of dismay at the institutions that plague us at the moment because they're all rotten to the core. I mean, I'm going to bring it back to Bitcoin pretty soon here. Every institution out there at the moment is rotten. Education is a joke. Higher education is a complete farce. It requires submission to ridiculous notions about gender and race and equality and all of these things that are excuses for people to want to control your life, that have no interest in doing anything other than climbing certain hierarchies themselves and pulling up the ladder behind them, and all the meanwhile claiming to be doing everything for the benefit of the poor and minorities and anyone who can be made to look disenfranchised through misleading statistics, all under a disingenuous guise and coupled with a holier-than-thou attitude that is just unacceptable to anyone that's paying attention. And the political correctness and the vilification of people in the wrong group, like, I'm tired of it, and I think everyone's tired of it. And back to the point, this ridiculous ideological stance and is now a part of a sort of brainwashing that goes on in higher education that costs more than it's cost in any part in a ever getting a degree at Harvard. Or it's all about certification and demonstration that you've been through a certain process. It has nothing to do with being intelligent or insightful or creative or capable of great contribution. It's entirely about, have you paid your dues to join this club? Are we going to let you be an editor for the New York Times? It's not that you can't demonstrate hate speech, it's that your hate speech has to be directed at the right people. Like Sarah Jeong of the New York Times saying, kill all white people, blah, this, that, this. She's a verified account on Twitter. She never gets in any trouble for this. It's racist, nasty shit. Because it's directed at the right group, no one cares. Instead, you're not going to see someone, this is not me advocating this, but you're not going to see someone writing that about a minority or a group that is higher up in the victim hierarchy. That's pathetic, and it shows a lack of integrity. And this is why, as a former lefty, and someone who remains a liberal, but someone who is completely disgusted with what the left has become, I have to look at it and go, this isn't something I don't understand and can agree to disagree on. No, it's something I used to be, and it's something that changed when I discovered Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin was the thing that showed me that you can, if you don't like something, you can build an alternative to that thing. You don't need to tear what you don't like down, especially if you don't understand it, which you probably don't. And I don't know who I'm directing that at, but maybe I'm talking to my former self here, in which case a lot of this can be considered projection, but I thought what I was doing was right the whole time. And I'm sure, and that's what we can all agree on, is that if you think what you're doing with your efforts to change the world and force your ideologies on other people, if you really do in your heart think you're doing the right thing, I did too. what happened when I discovered Bitcoin? This was the depths of Occupy Wall Street. Um, my anger was mainly directed at banks, and I felt a lot of people's anger was directed at banks because that's another example of an institution that is just completely rotten to the core. It started in the 80s. It got worse and worse. The subprime mortgage crisis, the credit crunch in 2008. Things got a lot worse then, but the rot remained. They were bailed out by a government who is another institution which is completely rotten to the core, printed as much money as they needed, handed it straight to the banks, propped up the banks. Anyone with a savings account, not only was the purchasing power of what they had saved away completely diminished, but they would see their interest rates collapse as well. And that's a deliberate tactic by governments to force people with money to spend that money on bullshit, because buying bullshit is an economy. And forcing people to buy stocks, shares, real estate, whatever, makes an economy tick along. But it's theft. And it's a very sneaky form of theft. Because if you steal 10% of someone's bank account, of their savings account, they're going to call the police. And if you do it, if you are the police and you do it, then that's different. But the way that feels is that was my money and it was taken from me. But if you inflate people's money away from them, you can make it so that the money they are holding is stealing from them in and of itself. If someone has $100 and in a year from now it can only buy them $97 worth of food, you've stolen $3 from them, but they don't feel it the same way. They don't notice. And through years and decades of economic indoctrination, we've been convinced that this is the normal way a currency is supposed to work. And it's not. And it's stupid. And it's so stupid that it will take you decades to understand it and feel like it's normal. And that will be highlighted when any child asks you about money and anything to do with the dynamics and mechanics of the economy. It's impossible to explain to kids because it is impossible to justify. Ask yourself why you pay taxes if the government can print money when it needs it. It doesn't make any sense. There's no logic for that. If they are just going to print 20% of the dollars that currently exist and use them as and how they like in America in 2020, why are you paying taxes? It doesn't make sense. These institutions, the banks, the government, the educational establishment, the medical establishment. I mean, I didn't get into this, but first, do no harm is the founding principle of medicine, and these lockdowns have done so much more harm than good. And the idea of administering a vaccine before it's properly tested and then backpedaling every time someone has an anaphylactic shock from it, that's not how you do medicine. And so many doctors must be absolutely devastated by what's being done to the trust that they have built up over the centuries. It's all being thrown away in a panic, in hysteria. And anyway, that was a little tangent. The point is, your money is stealing from you. You work, you have a finite, limited amount of time in your life. You can use that how you want. And you can store, you can acquire wealth in whatever means you can acquire it. And it makes sense to plan for the future and orient yourself towards the future, especially if you have children and grandchildren. And you need to find a way. The storage is a difficult problem to solve, and it's a time-honored. It's a problem that's plagued humanity forever. How do you store your wealth? Well, you're always going to look to something that's fundamentally scarce, that the universe doesn't make any more of. And the worst thing you can turn your head, that you could rely on for something like that, is something that can be created on a whim by politicians, which we refer to as fiat currency. Fiat meaning let it be done. And that's because the money you see in your bank account, that really, I don't want to talk about anything being backed by something, or everyone has a different theory on why money has the value it does. But I'm telling you that US dollars do not have any value. They have some utility, but they have no value. And the world is beginning to realize that. And I'm looking at my chart right now, and it's 28,356 American dollars to buy one Bitcoin. And I have been through cycle after cycle after cycle of people realizing that Bitcoin is a thing that you can swap your time, your precious time on this planet for, and hold on to, and it's worth holding on to. And a generation through the meme of HODL, HODL, has rediscovered through this meme the idea of saving for the future, which has been ridiculed by Keynesian economics for the last few generations, because the economists going in and coming out and moving between higher education, teaching economics at Harvard, and then going in and out and coming back and running as Secretary of the Treasury, and all these like running for the chairman of the Federal Reserve. You got Ben Bernanke, Tim Geithner, all of these complete assholes who ruined the economy, who did everything they could to protect the people that ruined the economy. It's a revolving door system between them and the people that educate the next generation of economists. And all of these economists have been hilariously wrong about Bitcoin since its inception. Paul Krugman's a great example. And all they do is, I don't know why he has any credibility left. He famously said, the internet will be no greater in its contribution to society than the fax machine. That was a great quote of his. And somehow he's still around and still a respected person, and he likes to take shots at Bitcoin all the time. And at some point, when do you admit you're a bloody moron? And he hasn't done that yet. When's Peter Schiff going to admit he's a moron? When are any of these people going to realize that you're not going to live forever, and you only have a certain amount of time on this planet, and you need to save? If you're going to create a future for your family, you need to save. And you need to save in a way that people can't fuck with if they want to. And the only way to do that on this planet is Bitcoin, for a million reasons. First off, it's scarce, and it's not going to suddenly become unscarce. As much as people might tell you, what if someone makes another currency just like Bitcoin? Then aren't there just twice as many and it's not scarce? No, it doesn't work like that. And I've explained why in my other videos, and it's quite a complicated thing to explain. But I don't really want to debunk arguments against Bitcoin in this video as much as I want to sing its praises and tell you about what it can do for you. It is scarce. It's scarce in the way that gold is scarce, but better. The laws of the universe mean it's very hard to make gold. Alchemy isn't real. If you want those heavier elements to exist, and those inert heavy metals that can't be denatured easily like gold, you're going to need a star to collapse in on itself. You're going to need something a lot heavier than the sun, about 3 times the solar mass or something like that. I'm not sure the exact physical process that goes into making gold, but it can't be manufactured by Justin Trudeau deciding there's going to be a bunch more of it tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. And that makes it a good store of value, and humanity has recognized gold as a store of value for a long time. But it's not perfect. In the 30s, in America, after the Great Depression, I think it was just after the Great Depression, the government started taking gold very seriously, and they combined that with outlawing anyone owning their own gold. They said, if you own gold, you have to give it back to the government. We'll give you some money for it. I believe they gave people money for their gold, but the point is, they can do that because it's realistic to do it. It's not easy to store gold. You can keep it in your house, but what happens if it gets stolen? It's gone. You can keep it with a third party, and then you've got to pay them a fee every month, or however often you want to pay them. and you've got to trust them to keep it for you. And if the government outlaws gold, then they go to all of the big companies that keep gold on people's behalf and say, those people no longer own that gold. It now belongs to the Central Bank of America or whatever. That's a risk you run. Then there's the third risk of, how do I know this gold I just bought is gold? That's a difficult problem to solve, and it's not easy. Gold has some problems. And, fourth problem. My country has just done something I really, really don't like. Like, for example, they've made it illegal to go outside without a mask, and they are, doing something that you consider completely unacceptable. I need to get out of here now, because this law is coming in at midnight. I'm going to jump on a plane and go. Hard to do that with gold. You can't get across borders with a big brick of gold. All of these problems are solved by Bitcoin. And some of the characteristics that gold solves are all just done more perfectly with Bitcoin. Gold shows up every now and again. It's a great store of value, but if someone discovers a few hundred kilos of gold somewhere in a mine in an uninhabited part of the earth, somewhere in East Russia or something like that, if you're holding gold as a store of value, that sucks, because there's a lot more of it suddenly. The supply is unpredictable. It's practically scarce, but it's not perfectly scarce. And again, all of these things were good enough until Bitcoin came around, by the way. Bitcoin is provably scarce. 21 million is the hard limit. Slightly under 21 million, by the way, but we always just say 21 million. No one can make any more of them. Not any process in this universe can make more Bitcoin than there already are. Not on any practical level. If you want to change the amount of Bitcoin there are, you have to hard fork the network. Hard forking Bitcoin's network is one of these things that can be done at any minute. You, right now, can go and hard fork Bitcoin's code and change the part of the node you're running to accept a block, the next block, 10 minutes from now, and say that block has 100 million Bitcoin, newly, freshly created, and they're real Bitcoin, and I will accept them. And you can do that. And you can also mine that block yourself. It will take you a long time to do it, but you can also make a part of your fork. Okay, we're going to reduce the difficulty as well. And I can mine on my laptop a new block on my forked network that has 22 million Bitcoin or whatever. Something that breaks that limit. The point is, anyone can do that at any time, but you'll be breaking consensus. And it's the only analogy I ever have for this is language. It's like if you change the meaning of one of the words in the English language and just start using it, it doesn't mean anyone knows what you mean, because you've deviated from what is the agreed upon and consented and the consensus and the protocol with which we all communicate to one another. And just because you changed doesn't mean you can force anyone else to change. What Bitcoin is a consensus network. It's a network that comes to consensus every 10 minutes with every new block, when they all verify it and each block adheres to the rules it expects the network to be enforcing every 10 minutes. There is a lot of expectation and a lot of reliability and a lot of reward for staying within the rules of the network, and there is no benefit ever to going outside it. I mean, the extreme example is saying let's make more than 21 million Bitcoin, because not only do you have to break all of these principles to change one of those rules, you have to get everyone else to agree on it at the same time. And what everyone will be agreeing to is, hey, let's make our scarce store of value much more diluted, and let's inflate it and basically rob everyone of all their savings. Let's do that. That's not going to happen. The only people that can ever do that are politicians and banks, and central banks rather. They are the only people that will voluntarily destroy a store of value, because they don't lose out when it happens, and it's a method of sustaining an unsustainable economy. No one has the ability to do that within Bitcoin except everyone simultaneously, and everyone in the Bitcoin network is not going to club together and say, hey, let's make our Bitcoins worth less. No one's going to do that. Not one of you, let alone everyone simultaneously. I mean, maybe you don't take much comfort in that, but it's important to know that that is the only option you have with Bitcoin to inflate the supply. That is the equivalent of finding a bunch of gold that you didn't know existed in the planet and it causing the value of any gold that existed in the market that was known about previously to drop. That's the one risk a gold owner has to deal with, and it's just kind of part of it. You're like, whatever, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, kind of sucks. They discovered a lot more gold in Kazakhstan. Fuck, now my gold is worth a bit less. You don't really think about it, but hey, what if there was something better than that? There is. It's Bitcoin. Bitcoin, you know how many there are going to be. The network is dynamically adjusting itself so that the creation rate of new coins remains predictable and it decreases every 4 years. It halves every 4 years to the point where by 2140, there will be no new Bitcoins created after that. And that's when we reach 21 million. We're already at about 19 million because coins were created so quickly at the beginning. And we've had a few halvings since then. So Bitcoin primarily solves one of the hardest problems we've ever faced, which is how do I store value in a way where the supply is predictable, no more of it can be created, and in a reliable way. And then the other problems I mentioned with gold, in a way where when I buy this thing or earn it, how do I verify that it is what I think it is? In Bitcoin, we've kept it deliberately as simple and as primitive as possible so that verification of everything that goes on in the network, particularly your receiving of Bitcoins, is as simple and as resource unintensive as possible. You can get a $30 Raspberry Pi and a crappy hard drive and a lame internet connection, download Bitcoin Core and synchronize yourself with the entire network in about a week. And that's a $30 computer, right? If you want to repurpose your old laptop from a few years ago, that will do it in a day. That's faster than getting a credit card or opening a bank account. And it brings you 100% equal player, equal standing, complete financial inclusion into the world's most robust financial network. That is a low bar to entry, and anyone can do it. And there are hundreds of thousands of people running those nodes as we speak, and they are what keep the network strong and give it its integrity. None of the shit coins offered as an alternative to Bitcoin have that, by the way, which is another reason they can't be trusted and can't be used in as a reliable store of wealth. So yeah, that's the verification part. And I don't mean to make this video a debunking of gold, but I'm just saying gold is great, but Bitcoin takes what's great about gold and takes it to a whole new level. So yeah, verifying gold is annoying and difficult, and holy shit, they just found $60 billion worth of gold bars in a Chinese vault that turned out to be gilded copper, not gold. If mistakes can happen on that level with that much money at stake, I'm sorry, your store of value has some problems. And while it might have been the champion of storage of value for the human race for a lot of millennia, I'm sorry, there's a way, way better thing in town now. So that's store of value. Then there's flight. If your government does something you absolutely cannot handle, and you need to leave right away and you need to get out of the country, good luck doing that with a bar of gold. You can do that with Bitcoin because Bitcoin can be stored up here if you really need it to be. And it can be stored as abstract information that only you can decode. You can encrypt what you need to encrypt, and you can have meaningless data on you when you move around borders if you really need to. You don't even need to take a hardware wallet with you. You just need to take the information that you upload into a hardware wallet when you get to your new location, to wherever the place is that allows freedom. No one can prove you own Bitcoin. They can prove you own gold if they come to your house and find gold, or if you're using a third party to store your gold for you. Was there a fourth thing I mentioned with gold that kind of sucked as well? There's verification, which is... no, I think it's mainly just three things. Flight was the fourth one. So I think it's the second one. Maybe I'll come back to it. But you got the fact that with I've covered the fact that with gold you can't run with it easily. You have to trust. Oh, sorry, yeah, storage. That was the other thing. Storing gold is really difficult. Sticking that in a safe in your house is not ideal. It's just not great to do. And storing it with a third party means you're not the custodian of your own wealth, which means you have to trust in the integrity of the third party and the system and the laws that the third party is forced to operate within. This all requires a lot of trust and faith in the stability of your society, and I'm sorry, it's 2020. I don't have much of that left, and I don't think anyone does. I think if you're paying attention and you can read the signs and you've read your Orwell, and I think if it wasn't for Bitcoin, we would be fucked. But this thing is providing a weapon that is your only serious choice of having some sort of personal autonomy left. Because you have, back in the 80s, to stop financial crimes or prevent finances moving around for criminals, they put in these $10,000 limits that said if anything happens above $10,000, the bank's got to report the transaction to the government. That limit never changed, but look at what happened to what $10,000 could purchase. In the 80s, $10,000 was a house. Maybe not a great house, but a house. In 2020, $10,000 is what? Not even enough to pay your rent for 1 year. It's maybe your grocery bills for 1 year. Something like that. If you've got a family, 4 or 5 people. I don't know how much you're spending in the store, but, some people spend that on gas every year. That's $10,000. It's not what it was. But it's still the threshold for... what that means is it's getting less and less legal, and there are more and more eyes on your transactions every minute. Cash is going away. Cash is becoming less and less relevant. It's even been vilified as dirty, and like a lot of people won't take cash because of COVID. I'm not trying to be too Alex Jonesy about it, but what's going on with that? It doesn't spell good. It's very interesting that Germany is a society. It's basically the only Western society where everyone still uses cash. And I've seen interviews where they walk around and ask random Germans why they're so into using cash and why it's so hard to find a place that accepts credit card. Everyone says it's because I need my money to be under my control. Why are they saying that? And I think it's because they remember what it's like to have a fascist government who likes to control you to a great extent. That's very much in the German memory at the moment. I mean, as far as I can tell, they're being as draconian as anyone is about COVID. So I used to sing their praises a lot more than I do now, but at least they have that in their consciousness, that you need an ability to spend your wealth that doesn't require a third party to be an arbitrator for it. But as the economy moves online, as every single small business has been closed down forcibly, and everyone is now buying everything off Amazon, whose stock price is going through the ceiling, you are going to be entirely dependent on middlemen. And those middlemen, like PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, they have a lot of opinions. Some of them are even more... Sometimes they won't let you do things that are perfectly legal just because they don't want you to do it. Like, ask anyone in the cannabis industry about that. Try dealing with payment processors as a person that buys and sells cannabis. Even if you're in Colorado and it's legal where you are and you're not breaking the law doing it, you're going to have endless trouble with banks, and you're going to be paying so much in commission. Then look at what these companies charge anyway. If you run a small business and you accept American Express, what is it, 7-8% they charge? And what are they doing? They're inserting themselves as an arbitrary middleman between themselves between the business and the customer, and they provide nothing. They don't do anything. They are and they are connected to various other financial institutions who sit around all day gambling, and whenever they win, they win big and they take their money, and when they lose, we have to bail them out. And middle class people with a savings account foot the bill. And this is not a fair or reasonable way to set up society. And appeals are always made to rescuing the poorest. And now we have basically universal basic income, which is unreal. I've heard idiots talking about it forever. It's Marxism rebranded, of course. And now suddenly it's here with COVID relief bills. We force everyone not to be able to work anymore. And don't worry, you can just accept this money from the government. The obvious result of that is everyone's getting money from the government. No one's doing anything anymore. But if anyone ever does anything outside an increasingly small list of acceptable behaviors, then you don't get that money from the government anymore. But the difference is, when you didn't get that money before, you could still afford stuff because you had a job and prices were lower. Now that everyone's getting X amount per week of free money for obeying a bunch of ridiculous rules, if you want to not accept that, then suddenly you're completely outside and you're completely broke, and you've got no freedom with which to go and operate in the world and earn a living like a normal person does in a free market. The free market is a hallmark of a great country, and it's been demonized by people that for some perverse reason seem to ignore the perils of stepping outside that. I mean, if the free market, for all its warts and for all its sins, in order to stop a free market, you have to create a system which controls everyone to the point where people aren't allowed to trade anymore. And if you want to create a system that draconian, it's going to become corrupt and it's going to kill a lot of people doing it. I mean, how simple is this? I don't want to be puerile about it, but if you want to stop me, I play piano. If you want to tell me I can't play piano for some Bitcoin, if you want to create an arbitrary middleman that judges whether that's okay or not, whoever you are, that person, I don't trust you, and no one should trust you. And I don't care if the reason you want to do that is to save a minority or to help this group of people or to stop someone from catching a bloody cold. No, I don't want you have no business in my life, because no one should trust you with that. So the way Bitcoin it can provide escape from this is all the middlemen are gone. So now no one has any control over you. No one is in between you and your customers, or between you and any business you want to transact with. So Bitcoin sucks as a medium of exchange. What I was talking about primarily when I was comparing it to gold was as its financial characteristics as a store of value. But if I start to talk about it as a medium of exchange, people find it clunky and annoying to use because it's not as easy as using a debit card or, cash or whatever. It's really annoying to use. But the point is, it has some properties which are just mind-blowing, which are, I just remembered when I was talking about store of value, and I was talking about the characteristics Bitcoin has instead of gold, and I was talking about storage. Storing Bitcoin can be done in a way where you can back up your storage, and that has not been possible with any other kind of money before. You can back up your Bitcoin, and that comes with risks, by the way, but that's an important thing, and it ties into what I was about to get into, which is when you make a Bitcoin transaction, it can be to anyone at any time for any amount. There are none of the restrictions you're used to, and you can make a payment to someone for $1 billion worth of Bitcoin or 5 cents worth of Bitcoin, and the burden to doing so is the same. which is crazy because if you wanna buy a hamburger with a debit card, it's an easy thing to do. But if you want to send 100 grand to Japan and then 200 grand to, France or something, and you're in Argentina or something like that, and you want to do it through banks, good fuck, I will see you in 6 months when you finally manage to get through all the red tape and you've paid all the fees that are going to happen. And I mean, the cost, just even if they didn't charge you a percentage, which they do when they convert from one currency to another, just the cost of how much time it takes, how much of your time and how much time the money spends sitting in limbo, and all of the fraud checks and all of the things that are for your benefit, apparently, all of these people, all the phone calls you're going to get when you think you've made the payment and it's gone through, and yes, it'll be there in 14 business days, nothing happens, you get a phone call from someone saying, yeah, this was flagged for fraud. Who's paying all these people's salaries? We are. And it's all being done for our benefit, apparently, but all it does is get in the way, because they don't stop anything. They don't prevent anything bad from happening. All they're trying to do is cover their own asses and comply with... I don't think there's any justification for that stuff. I think personal responsibility is a big part of it. And when it comes to the Bitcoin system, you can use it in a custodial way if you want. You can keep your Bitcoin on an exchange, and then if you want to spend your Bitcoin on something that the exchange doesn't want you to spend it on, you can't spend it on it, and then you're back in the old system. But the point is, you don't have to use Bitcoin like that, because it's cash. It's digital cash, which means if you want to use it you can use it in any way that you see fit, but you can't back up cash, and you can't lose Bitcoin in a fire. Well, you can, but you won't if you've backed it up properly. Bitcoin it offers you a freedom from a system of control, fundamentally. There's no one that's going to inflate away the value of it, because it's impossible. There is no one that is going to be able to take it from you or deny you the ability to spend it in any way you see fit. And that's huge. In the current political climate especially, not everyone is as paranoid as I am about government overreach, and I understand that. But I do genuinely think, if you're not, this is the end of December 2020, if you're not saying this has gone too far, the entire Western world is, 90% of it is now in basically the police state, and they are justifying it off of faulty science, which I'm not allowed to question on social media, because I get piled on by Karens and just people that are yelling science at me like it's some sort of... I mean, you do have the feeling of being Copernicus, saying, look, the Earth revolves around the sun, and having people... COVID is a religion now, and it's a particularly destructive religion that I mean, it should be apparent to you at this point. This is not a good thing, and it's never coming back, because diseases aren't going away. So the approach to this will be adopted for all future diseases. I don't care if the vaccine is suddenly a miracle and it's the best vaccine we've ever seen, and it cures COVID and it's great, and COVID is gone by March or April when everyone's been vaccinated. So fucking what? There's going to be another flu and another cold, and there's no way they're going to be like, yeah, we're not going to use any of the stuff we did for COVID. No, of course that's not going to happen. You're going to be a grandma killer if you advocate for that. We're never going back to the old way of life, ever, where we used to say, if you're not doing well, if you've got cancer, if you're really badly diabetic or something like that, you're the one that needs to take some responsibility, and we will help, and we will provide care for you. But the rest of us aren't going to stay at home under permanent house arrest so as to not risk spreading stuff to you, because the cost is too great. That has been forgotten now. We've reprioritized stuff. You're never going to get that cat back in the bag. And that is an absolute disaster. And it's something we watch China do, And I laughed because China is a totalitarian shithole where they will weld you in your apartment if they don't, because they don't give a fuck about anyone, and there's no respect for human life in that under that regime there. And I say it every day. Fuck the Chinese Communist Party. They are the absolute butthole of the planet, and it's surprising how little anyone seems to give a shit. And they exported their approach to COVID to the entire planet, and now we're all running around like, you know, we are in a pure, and I don't know why I'm saying this because I'm putting a target on my back, but this is George Orwell's 1984. I've watched history be rewritten. I've watched the tearing down of statues. I've watched the endless assertions of the claims of people who make everything about identity politics and class, and I've watched fraudulent use of science. The most poignant example of it I find is that religion is now so derided and mocked and illegal, churches are pretty much illegal. Like, you couldn't go to church on Christmas Day. I've never been to church in my life, but I don't want to be told I'm not allowed to go to church. No thanks. That's thought control. That's control over something. And it's reminiscent of every Soviet country. Religion in China and the Soviet Union, they have atheism classes. They need to remove that fantasy and that magic from the human spirit. They need to, because they want to replace it with themselves. They want you to worship them. They want you to worship Stalin. They want you to worship your benevolent dictator. They want that to be where that energy goes. They don't want the competition of a deity. And I'm sorry. When you contrast that with the fact that you can still go to the store and buy whiskey if you want, and you can still go and buy cannabis. Every other store in Vancouver is a cannabis store. This drug was illegal fucking 10 minutes ago. Now it's essential, but I'm not allowed to go to church. I'm sorry, everything about this, the aesthetic, is pure Orwell, and I'm hoping that this was my realization that suddenly we've gone past the point of no return, and now it's a situation where even if Bonnie herself, the Canadian idiot health woman, said, "I don't agree with this. We need to stop these lockdowns," she would be chewed up and spat out. And it wouldn't be worth her career to do it. She'd be ignored and she'd be ridiculed. And this thing has developed a momentum of its own, and we're now in the psychology of a witch hunt, where no one can speak. Everyone in a witch hunt can hate the witch hunt, but if anyone speaks out against the witch hunt, they'll be declared a witch and killed. So the thing becomes unstoppable. And at this point, I can believe that everyone's fed up of COVID. Like, there's a few idiots that are still walking around terrified, but I mean, at some point, yes, there's always going to be idiots, but at this point, it's become a thing where I'm like sussing out people I meet. Are you still worried about this thing? It starts with a handshake. You got to shake someone's hand, and what do they do? Do they give you a judgmental look? Do they just shake your hand out of social awkwardness? Or do they shake your hand with a certain amount of dignity and yeah, I've got someone here that is fair, like that's not letting fear run their life, and maybe even more than that, understands what's at stake if we just let this thing continue on the path it's continuing. But anyway, Orwell was a genius, and he was completely right, and he highlighted over and over again the pointlessness of trying to fight it when these systems go this way. And my own description of the police state and totalitarian government control and the stuff we all knew was happening under Obama's administration, and it was started by George Bush with mass surveillance, all exposed by Edward Snowden. When the intelligence agencies all demonstrated themselves to be full of shit, the persecution of anyone that would blow a whistle on any of it, like Julian Assange. We all knew the writing was on the wall, and we didn't care whether it was the Democrats or the Republicans. It's got nothing to do with it. But Obama made everything just unbelievably difficult to ever restore, and Trump didn't really give a shit about civil liberties as much as he was pretty much the best president of my lifetime. All he did was sort of not make things worse in that regard for a while. Some of the more the ugly justifications for the erosions of civil liberties, that all the masquerading about we care about minorities, we care about the critical race theory, the whole there's just endless attacks on white males, and just this bullshit just masquerading as compassion. Trump kicked a lot of that out of the federal institutions, which was great to see, but I mean he was holding back the tide. That stuff this class-based Marxist bullshit is completely dominant in every single institution, especially the educational ones. But I mean, even the medical ones now, they're rolling out vaccines to young people before old people, they said, because old people are predominantly white. And white people have, this is literally the Center for Disease Control have said this. They don't want to give vaccines to older people, despite older people being more vulnerable, because older people are generally richer and whiter, which makes them less deserving of it. And that's not me exaggerating. I don't have the wording exactly right, but that's what they've said. That's not medicine anymore. That's political activism. It's total bullshit. We're all sick of it. Everyone is sick of it, especially minorities who showed up in droves to vote for Trump, even though he's supposed to be racist and all this bullshit. No, he's not. I mean, yeah, like I might alienate a lot of people with this video, but this is the reality of it. And we have this idea that Bitcoiners get called toxic a lot because they're so outspoken about their opinions, and they're so defiant, and they're so outside everything all the time. But I mean, Bitcoin is not a company. It doesn't have a marketing department. It just has people like me with strong opinions who are not embarrassed about those opinions. And when it comes down to it, you have to be prepared to think outside of what's acceptable to think. And it is not, as much as I find myself in very bad company with supporting Trump over Biden anyway, it's still something that is not okay to admit. And it's not something that I want to do just because it's not okay and just because I'm a contrarian. It's because on balance, I think foreign policy, he's the first president not to start a war in my lifetime. That should count for everything right there, but no one cares. No one gives a flying fuck about that, and that's why I find myself so disenfranchised from the modern left, because that used to be priority number one for the left was, are you going to start a war? He didn't. He pulled troops home, and as far as I can tell, the left just don't care about that. They just want to keep scoring points and playing this stupid power game, and always using the excuse of compassion and care of minorities and the disenfranchised as a justification for it. But it's always just a power grab. And now we want to protect grandma, and we want the health, and Trump killed 200,000 Americans. No, he didn't. What did you want him to do? What did you want Trump to do? I say to all the trolls on Twitter and all these fucking idiots. Anyway, that's one element that's just a political element. But I mean, back to the point of what I was saying about George Orwell. George Orwell, he was a genius and he had everything right, and his point was no one can stand up to these systems, and everyone in the system can hate the system, but if anyone tries to do anything about it, the system chews them up. And it's when I'm telling people, don't do this, they can do this, they can see when you do that, they know when you've done. People roll their eyes at me and go, who's they? Who's the they who's control? Is it the Illuminati? No, actually it's not. And there isn't a they. Because as far as I'm concerned, every human hates these systems. And I've always characterized police states as the cancer of humanity. And cancer is annoying and stupid because cancer kills its host. Cancer will kill the thing that gives it life. and police states will strangle the humans that make this police state possible. And it's a tragedy, but there's just nothing you can do about it. If you want to kill your cancer and you don't have access to miraculous medicine, kill yourself and the cancer will go. It's horrible, but that's the reality of cancer. If you want to end the police state, you've got to end your species. You've got it's growing inside us, and unless we can keep it at bay, then we're going to have to live with it. And I don't care, your justifications for it are never, ever valid, especially for some pussy disease like COVID. No way. And as my original point, back to my original point, which was, if it was flying AIDS, we would just take the precautions ourselves and we wouldn't need the police state to enforce lockdowns anyway, because we'd just voluntarily do it. I've seen many stats saying that in April, everything was dead. No one was doing anything. Everyone was scared shitless and they were at home. In Christmas, everyone was just defying the lockdowns as best they could and hoping their neighbours weren't reporting them. That's rough. I mean, that's sad, because that just shows that the population and the institutions are completely out of sync. That's never good when that happens, because we need to trust our institutions, and we can't, because they're all full of shit. And it's not that they've always been full of shit. That's not true. The American political system was something you could respect for a while. It's not now. Financial institutions, it should be possible to say, hey, I'm going to pay you this much money every month. Can you keep my gold safe and not steal it, please? It should be, and if you give me a certificate that says I have this much gold in the bank, and you do that for other people too, can you not start printing certificates for gold you don't have? Can you not run at a fractional reserve, please? Can you prove your reserves once a month? Can you actually do that? It should be possible to go to a doctor and not worry about... It should be possible to go and visit your dying aunt or your dying whatever relative who's got a few days left to live, without all the people in the hospital preventing you from entering the building because of this bullshit COVID disease. Do you know how many people have died from other diseases due to the hospitals not running properly at the moment? It's heartbreaking, and I hear about these stories all the time. The disruption COVID has caused, our response to COVID has been one of the most fatal things humanity's ever done. And it dwarfs how fatal COVID itself actually is. That's the truth of it. And we don't seem to be able to stop. We have, I think it was Naval Ravikant on Twitter who described it as monomania, which is all we care about is COVID. And if we have to chop off our own head to stop someone from getting COVID, we'll do it and forget. Hold on. Can we maintain a sense of perspective here? So, I don't know why I keep getting off into that, but to me, the COVID and Bitcoin they come up in order to understand what Bitcoin is. You have to understand what a load of bullshit the approach to COVID is, because ultimately Bitcoin comes down to self-sovereignty and personal responsibility, and a lack of dependence on third parties, but a lack of control over you by third parties. And if you want to live that kind of life and you want that kind of freedom, and you should want that kind of freedom, and you should aspire to be the kind of person that can handle that kind of responsibility. It's so disappointing for me when I get a client who wants me to hold their Bitcoins for them, or wants to buy Bitcoins and just leave them in the exchange. Because they're missing out the whole point of this, which is once you buy some Bitcoin and you have them under your control in your wallet, then you are outside of the system and you are free. And because of the nature of it being deflationary, it's exciting to watch the dollar value fly up and up and up of what you've purchased. But once you understand Bitcoin and once you go for it, the peaks and the troughs aren't going to matter to you anymore. you're just going to think, how much is one Bitcoin worth? It's worth one Bitcoin. That's how much it's worth. It's not worth $28,336 and, oh no, $28,331. Oh, if I'd sold, I could have bought back and made $3. So what? Dollars. Dollars are arbitrary. They are created at the whim of politicians. They will be taken from you unless you're talking about the dollar bills in your wallet, which are increasingly meaningless. Because once upon a time, $50, $100 could buy you something. Now it can't. And that's the reality of storing it as cash. Cash is going away. There's been a war on cash forever because the institutions that make money when you don't use cash are attacking it, and they are powerful. And everything is being done online, as I mentioned. Cash is gone. That means your dependence on middlemen when it comes to financial interaction is increasing at an alarming rate. And you're being tied down to a jurisdiction and its political class. That's no good either. And I mean, what if you live in France and you want to leave and go to, and you want to go to Turkey or whatever? You have to deal with the fact that you've got to change currency, and there's expenses to doing all that. And basically, it's expensive, and it leaves you with a sense of powerlessness. And what I was saying about, I hate it when people walk away from their power, and when they ask me to be the custodians of their Bitcoin for them, or they want to leave them in exchanges, they're missing the whole point. And the whole point of Bitcoin is freedom and responsibility. And you can't have one without the other. And it's the old libertarian argument, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And that's what society lacks right now. And back to Orwell. Orwell was right about everything, but he didn't know that something like Bitcoin would come along. And the fact that Bitcoin is here, it gives us an incredible tool to fight back, because we can create, and we have created, our own financial independence. We have created a system where we can store wealth without having to depend on third parties. And we can create a system where that wealth can't be confiscated, and they can't even prove that you own anything. Or I should say, it can't be proved that you own any. Your ability to verify it yourself without depending on a third party is gone. Your ability to store it yourself without needing a third party is absolute. Your ability to flee with it and to not have it confiscated or detected on you as you flee is absolute. You are in a complete land of total financial freedom with Bitcoin. And there's a lot to unpack with it, because you have to understand the whole economic system that you've been forced to accept is bullshit. Keynesian economics, which is the principle of ruin people's money so that they have to spend it so that we maintain an economy, and no, that's not going to fly. But I mean, that's the dominant system. Bitcoin is a different economic system, and you have to understand it, but it's an Austrian economic system where it doesn't work that way. Austrian economics is fine with deflation and savings, and actually, being able to plan in the long term rather than just, I earn this much and I spend this much, so therefore my life is in balance. That's no good to me. I want to be able to acquire and build slowly. And anyway, maybe I've rambled enough on this video, but I've been reading The Sovereign Individual, and it's a fantastic book, and it was the perfect thing to be reading at the time I discovered it, because I really am that worried about Orwell's predictions becoming complete reality in the West. And Sovereign Individual predicts a currency like Bitcoin becoming available, and it has, and now you can use that. And if you don't own any Bitcoin yet, what I encourage you to do is make an account with an exchange and get a wallet and buy some Bitcoin and withdraw that Bitcoin from the exchange to your wallet, and then just get comfortable with it and move it around and play around with it and see what you can do with it. And just understand that all of the old paradigm is done and money now works a new way. And the sooner you understand and get comfortable with it and learn how it works, well, I don't know. The advantage to doing so is huge. Like, I can usually there is a religious element to Bitcoin, I suppose. And I don't like, it's not a nice thing to admit, but I mean, it's money at the end of the day. And there is some element of faith that's required when planning for the long-term future. You do need some sort of faith, because if my faith in humanity drops low enough, then I don't think Bitcoin will save us either. I don't think anything will save us if we go full police state where there's nothing anymore. There's no internet. There's no means of communication, and just about have some electricity, and maybe you have some land, and but even that, you're maintaining it with your own weaponry. And Bitcoin isn't useful in that situation. But Bitcoin actually stops things from getting that bad, because Bitcoin provides a way for us to have an uninterrupted medium of exchange with one another, which means we can, no matter how bad stuff gets, no matter how much, look, I mean, in Canada, it's $3,000. That's how much you can spend a day. And how much can you withdraw for an ATM? 500, sometimes 1,000. That's it. And they're printing and printing and printing, and that money is going to be worth less and less and less. And eventually, your money is going to be something that if you want to use, you're not going to be able to use it in any practical sense. I mean, you're going to have to come into a branch and organize drafts, and all of this stuff puts so many limits and so many barriers between you and the person you're trying to pay. When Bitcoin gets rid of all those things, it creates a free market again. And a free market is how you can have civilization. That is the essence of a civilization, is a free market. And when you have one of those, everyone isn't constantly fighting to survive and having to do everything themselves for their family. Instead, people can specialize and do what they're good at. And I can't believe I'm having to justify this, but this is one of these things we just take for granted. But through exchange, one man's prosperity becomes every man's prosperity. It's fantastic. I want to do what I'm good at and what I love, and I want to be able to receive a medium of exchange and a store of value for doing it, and I can swap it back to you. I don't want to return to a barter system, because it's just so clunky and so. But I don't want to be cutting a pig into 3 different parts because I want to buy 19 chickens off you. It doesn't work like that. Humanity's never going to accept going back to something like that. And our money has become so, not sophisticated, but so perverse and so bureaucratized. Is that a word? So just laden with bureaucracy that using it is going to become money is expensive. Just having money is expensive. If you've got 100 grand in the bank, you are feeling it burn a hole in your pocket as it loses value, as just the cost of having it where it is, the cost of moving it sucks. The cost of money and the financial system costs you a fortune. Bitcoin is free. Except for the transactions themselves, it is free. And that's the way it should be. And it's free to participate in, and there's no requirements. No one's going to check your credit when you run a Bitcoin node. But I mean, you want to store value in something? Bitcoin's volatile, right? So people are worried when they buy some, because you can buy a peak. If you bought in late 2017 and it was at 20,000 and it crashed all the way down to 3,000, that hurt. But I'm telling you, you probably didn't sell, and now it's back 50% higher than that. Good for you. And it's going to go up to hundreds of thousands of dollars soon, and then it will crash again, maybe. But I actually don't think so anymore. I don't think it's going to crash. I always have to make people aware of that, because I don't want to be responsible for, people buying stuff and being like, it's never going to go down. But this is not a price prediction video, and that's not the point of this anyway. It cheapens Bitcoin to discuss that, because Bitcoin is such an insult to it to value it in terms of something like the United States dollar. And its price kind of reflects that. It's saying, you want to give me dollars for a Bitcoin? All right, I'm going to need about 30,000 of them. Otherwise, you're not having it. At this point, people should be waking up and going, this isn't a bubble. This is just something that is changing the way we look at money. And I'm not prepared to look at money and say that the dollar is money. It's just not. It's not it doesn't fulfill any of the characteristics. It's an awful store of value. And then on the store of value subject, I've been talking about gold mainly because it's just the best alternative we have to Bitcoin. But people love real estate because you got to live somewhere as well, right? But government knows that, and the taxes and the legal requirements, the insurance, everything about it is just such a drain on your pocket. And the only reason, people will say don't buy a house as an investment. Make sure you want to live there. And you've got to live somewhere, so fair enough. But that isn't, if you've got somewhere you live already, don't buy property. Buy Bitcoin. But, this is not financial advice, but I say that not because I want you to get rich. I say that because I want you to experience and handle the responsibility of freedom. You don't have freedom when you own a house. You're literally told you have to buy insurance for this thing. Why? Insurance is someone saying, if it burns down, someone's got to pay for the cost of that. And it can't be you. So you have to pay someone else to shoulder the burden of the risk of that may be happening. Like, no, this is legally enforced gambling of some sort. It's kind of perverse. Like, no, it's my place. I'm going to own it, and I will take any risks that come with that. And this is not allowed. Like, when I buy Bitcoin, no one tells me I have to insure my Bitcoin. Because what would be the point? When banks all have deposit insurance, so when they collapse, they have insurance, and the insurance companies can bail them out. And if the insurance company gets too many banks collapsing at once, then the government has to bail out the insurance company. But at the end of the day, all that's happening is dollars are being printed and given to big institutions. That can't happen with Bitcoin because no one can print extra Bitcoin and bail anyone out. So the responsibility goes all the way back to the user, which is, if you lost your Bitcoin, you're SOL. Sorry. If you kept them safe, congrats. You have the world's hardest money. You have the thing that you are entirely responsible for. You are now your own bank. Amazing. Enjoy the freedom. Be careful with it. Basically, guys, it comes down to, I don't want to live in George Orwell's 1984. We already do, but we have a technology at our hands. And coming from a place of resent-driven leftism ideology that I grew up in, that was characteristic of the middle classes in Europe in the 90s, and that I spent so long going through, and I really was trying to make the world a better place. I discovered Bitcoin through it, and I realized Bitcoin is the only thing that can improve the world, because it's not about the ends, it's about the means. The ends never justify the means, and Bitcoin's ends are great, but Bitcoin's means are totally morally justified because it's a completely voluntary system that coerces no one, that will allow participation by anyone. And this is, it's being done for freedom's own sake, and that is a goal worth itself. And this is why I am where I am in Bitcoin today, and why I have never ever sold a coin I didn't need to sell, because I wanted the system to succeed. And there are so many like me who believe in it for the ideological reasons of it. And And it's a hard thing to get into because there is not a lot of sincerity. And I'm sorry it's taken me this long to get to this in this video to talk about this, but there is not a lot of sincerity in people that would come to you with something that they're proposing in a semi-religious fashion with, I mean, it's almost like a savior of sorts of humanity. And this is absurd for a lot of people to hear and sacrilegious, but I do believe it. And it's quite trivial for me to dismiss the other people's dismissal of my attitude to it with a sort of appeal to the value of what I own, because if you are the sort of person that believes like I do, it's quite possible that you were around in Bitcoin 8 or 9 years ago and you got as much as you could and you held as much as you could. And anyone that did that has tens or hundreds of thousands of % more in terms of dollars than they did back then. And even if you started with $10, that means you own hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. And there's not a single person in the world really that can authentically look at that and say, this whole thing sounds like bullshit to me. It's not bullshit. And the reason it's not bullshit the reasons are many, many, many reasons, but I don't think I'm deluded. And I don't think Bitcoin is I don't think it's an exaggeration to make the kind of claims I do when I say that it can liberate us. And it's the one tool we have at the moment that will escape us that will allow you to escape from control and the erosion of your freedoms that are never coming back. I think Bitcoin is the tool, and I know it's the tool. And if we didn't have Bitcoin right now, I would have no hope for humanity whatsoever. And I mean, there are those that are the religious look to other places, and I totally respect that. But I don't find I need a practical and technological solution to what we face at the moment. I don't need a spiritual one, because people's spirits have been eroded and people have been demoralized, and we don't have that in our culture anymore, in our spirit. In the free world, religion has been mocked and derided and bred and kicked out of people, and faith in God and there's been nothing but a mockery of the traditional values that we take for granted, that have created such stability and such prosperity. They've been ripped apart, and everyone is, to be cynical is to be informed, and to be hopeful and optimistic is to be an idiot. And that has been reality since I was a kid. And it's been a horrible, for me it's characterized by the media so well, especially The Simpsons from the 90s. There's nothing but cynicism in it, because that's what a truly relevant TV show from that time would display, because that's the real world. Every institution is completely corrupt, and everything is a bald-faced lie. And that's why religion is not a powerful enough force for us anymore. Society has eroded its divinity, and that's what Marxist societies always do. And but I have faith in a technology, and I had a lot of faith in the internet, but the internet has proved to just be another tool of mass surveillance, though it has enabled some useful means of resistance and sharing of information. Sure, but finance, that's a different story. Once you take away the government's ability to control through printing money arbitrarily, through setting inflation rates, and through controlling all the mediums of exchange and defining what is legal and what isn't with regard to actual transactions, once you take all of those abilities away from a state and use something like Bitcoin, the state suddenly doesn't have its trump card. And at that point, that's how you win. And you are incentivized to do it, not for the moral reasons. It's difficult because it's a big and complicated topic, but you're not incentivized to do it for that if you don't want to. You can just buy Bitcoin and you can multiply by 10 in terms of dollar values what you put in. But my point is, I hope you don't do that for that reason. I hope you do it, and if someone were to say to you, you put in a few $1,000s into Bitcoin and now you have millions of dollars, sell them. I'd hope that if someone says that to you, you would just think to yourself, what the fuck am I going to do with millions of dollars? I would just buy Bitcoin with it. So I'm not going to do that. If that is the situation you find yourself in, I would love that. And that's the situation that all the Bitcoiners I know are in. We are buying, and we are buying, and we are buying, and we are holding, and I hope this video has made an impression on you, and that you understand the significance of, or it's just something at least about my perspective on why I'm in this space and why I will be such a passionate advocate for it. And most of what I do is sit down with people and teach them the self-sovereignty of it, because I'm not a financial advisor. I don't want you to sit down, buy some Bitcoin, leave it on exchange, and then sell it again at a big profit. That's the most boring thing in the world to me, and you can do that with anything else. Go and do it with Tesla stock if you want. It's not interesting to me. I want you to buy something with your money that's been sitting in a bank that you're not really allowed to use in any way that you might want, and put it outside that system and exist in a free world suddenly. And then, I mean, Bitcoin's proved itself. We have every billionaire pouring into it now, and these people aren't all idiots, you know. Then you have countries like Iran using it to evade sanctions because it's not allowed to use the United States dollar. I mean, it's a heavy player now. So I don't need to sit here and convince you that it's not some pyramid scheme that's going to fall apart. I mean, most people arguing that it is a pyramid scheme, whatever they say can be just said about any money or gold. You know, it's hard. Like, when it comes to humans deciding a thing is valuable or not, that isn't intrinsically valuable, you can't eat it or you can't drive it or put it in your car and use that to drive. You know, anything that isn't directly obviously usable isn't intrinsically valuable, but humans do need a store of value, and those things it would be good if they don't have any sort of externality to them. Like, if you could eat a Bitcoin, I'd say it would be useless as a store of value. Anyway, I really hope some people are inspired by this, and if you're always welcome to write to me and let me know, especially if you disagree with some stuff or if you want any clarification on anything. All I like to do is discuss Bitcoin and politics with people, and I'm really hoping that despite George Orwell's genius, there was a technological savior that would allow humans to freely interact and exchange with one another and maintain an element of freedom so crucial that an entire society can be built upon it and flourish and enjoy the freedoms we've had in the West and continue to do so. And I think it's not just that I think that Bitcoin is our only hope at it. I think it's quite realistic. I think it's quite possible that we can do this with Bitcoin. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you for watching. And please, if you do like it, help me out with this YouTube channel. Do the stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, all that. And if there's a video you'd like me to cover, any element of Bitcoin, please let me know, and I'll cover it. And thank you so much for watching, and have a good night.